Christine Zellers, and I'm with Rutgers Cooperative Extension of Cape May County's Family and Community Health Sciences Department. And I have with me tonight Jennifer Sawyer, who is from our Agriculture and Natural Resources Department at Rutgers Cooperative Extension. Really quick couple housekeeping things. I am going to open an early poll right now. So if you're on the call and you could go ahead and answer some of those questions, we're just trying to get an inkling of what things you're already doing and what's important to you. And we kind of use that towards the purposes of the future and, you know, what people are doing to change their lifestyle after watching our program. So we're really interested in that information so that we're doing things that help you all out. Let's see if I click on this. There we go. Just to give you a little background information, Rutgers Cooperative Extension is part of the New Jersey Agricultural Experiment Station. Rutgers is a land-grant university, meaning it has cooperative extension services throughout New Jersey to support community with educational information that's scientifically research-based. Rutgers Cooperative Extension is a partnership, and it's a partnership between the Board of County Chosen Freeholders in each county, Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, and the USDA's National Institute of Food and Agriculture. And we currently have faculty or staff in 21 of the 21 New Jersey counties. So we were 20, and now we have all 21 counties have someone in them from Cooperative Extension, which is great. We're composed of 3 departments, which include Agriculture and Natural Resources. Like I said, that's Jen's department, 4-H and Youth Development. And then the department I work with is Family and Community Health Sciences, or FCHS. FCHS provides outreach in New Jersey and beyond on topics related to nutrition, chronic disease prevention, food safety, and overall wellness. And then Jen's department covers the agriculture, works with the growers, teaches to the community. So our job, again, is really to be out there in the community and sharing this valuable information with everyone. We hope you'll visit our website. At the end of my presentation, I'm going second tonight, I'll have our social media handles and all of our information so that you are able to find us after the program. I do want to point out that at the end of the program, I'm going to release another poll. And in that poll, we do ask the question on how would you guys like to see this program continue? And that's really important to us too. So please stick around for that and do that. Looks like we have a couple questions. Somebody is talking about Myrtle Beach. Oh,
yeah,
get
someone
tomatoes
is watching
on your
from
burgers
the
as you answered them. Like that.
Yeah,
That's a good response. Get tomatoes on your burgers. That's a good way to add them in for sure.
Exactly.
So in accordance with federal and U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA civil rights regulations and policies, this institution is prohibited from discriminating on the basis of race, color, national origin, sex, age, and disability. So at this point, I'm going to turn the part of the program over that Jen is handling. So let me just stop sharing here. Okay. And let's see. Jen, it's all yours if you want to share your screen.
Okay. Do you want to end the polling or?
Yeah, let me see how many we have in here.
It's like 7 out of
12. Come on, guys. We only have 58%.
I think, well, there's a few people on their phones.
Yeah, I see that. That's fine. I understand that. And we appreciate you joining us anyway. So we get it. Yeah, I'll end the poll in about a minute. So if you want to get started, Jen, I'll pull it down and then end it for you.
Okay. Thanks, Chris. As Chris said, I'm Jen Sawyer. I'm the Ag and Natural Resources Program Associate for Commercial Agriculture for the Rutgers Cooperative Extension of Cape May County. I also am in charge of our horticultural helpline. And tonight I'm going to talk just a little bit about growing tomatoes and eggplant. And let's see. And it doesn't want to go. There we go. So both tomatoes and eggplant are considered solanaceous crops. That's the family that they're in. They're warm season. It does say perennials, but we grow them as annuals here. In other climates, you may be able to keep a tomato or an eggplant going into a second season. But where we live in New Jersey, that's not really viable unless you have a greenhouse to put them into. So just so you could, I thought it'd be interesting that people could see a couple of the other plants that are related to the tomato and the eggplant. So tomatoes and peppers are both solanaceous crops. They naturally are self-pollinating. That means that they don't need pollinators.
What did you put back in the bowl?
I'm just going to mute you there, Pam. It's so, so they'll be pollinated by the wind. They can be pollinated by pollinators. They pollinate themselves. Other solanaceous crops are potatoes.
I don't know why it took me off.
And
Could everyone please remain muted?
And tomatillos. So here's just a nice little selection of different tomatoes that, I wish I could grow tomatoes that look that nice. When you're deciding what type of tomatoes you want to grow in your garden, you want to consider the vine types. There are determinate, where their shoots terminate in a flower cluster, and you get a more concentrated yield, and the plant gets to a determined size. They're usually, sometimes they're listed as bush variety, or most of the time seed packets will say determinate on there, and they tend to have most of the fruit will ripen all at once. They're semi-determinate, where it's kind of in between determinate and indeterminate. And your indeterminate, those tend to be your heirlooms, cherry tomatoes. The shoots will continue to grow and put out more shoots. There's a few leaves between flower clusters, and you'll get a nice yield over the season. As the plant continues to grow and put out new growth, it will put out new fruit. And they do tend to need some sort of support, trellising, cages, things like that. So
No, because
so you want to make sure when you're deciding what to plant, how much room you have to plant. You can use determinants, grow very well in small places. You can grow them on your patio in a pot. Indeterminates will grow, but have to take into consideration the support that they'll need. Otherwise, the vine can just keep on growing and growing. So here's just a list of tomato varieties that do really well in New Jersey. This comes from Rutgers research. And another thing to take into consideration when you're deciding what type to grow is growing an early season variety, a mid-season, and a late season. And that way you can kind of you can spread your tomatoes out over the season. So 4th of July, this is an interesting one. Excuse me for 1 second. So I actually grow 4th of July, and this is about the size of them. They started ripening about a week after the 4th of July, but these are one of the earliest seasons. As you can see, it's 49 days to maturity. They are an indeterminate, so they are a binding variety, so they do need to be trellised or caged. And a lot of 4th of July you can get as seed. You can buy them locally as starter plants. Early Girl is another good one that matures at 50 days. They're kind of smallish fruit, maybe a little bit bigger, to the same size as the 4th of July's. And then you have your bigger fruits for your Morton and your Red Deuce. Your mid-season, Better Boy, Big Beef, Big Boy, Celebrity. Celebrity is a real common one for local farm growers. Celebrity is something that grows really well out in field conditions. And let's see, and then a late season will be the Ramapo. And you can see that there's some celebrities are semi-determinate, so they're kind of bushy and kind of viney, and they produce over a longer period of time. Now you'll see there's some disease resistance. It lists the different, F I think is for Fusarium, and V is for a tomato virus. And all of that kind of information will be listed when you're looking at your seed packets or when you're looking to buy starter plants. You want to make sure you have something that's with as much disease resistance as possible if you're going to be growing non-heirloom varieties. So there are some specialty tomato varieties. So you have different heirlooms. Now heirlooms are not disease resistant for the most part. A lot of them are also indeterminate varieties, so they'll need trellising. And they have a shorter shelf life, which is why you don't find a whole lot of the larger heirlooms in markets. You might find them at roadside stands, but not so much at supermarkets and things like that. There's your plum tomatoes, also cherry tomatoes, grape tomatoes, and all of these are pretty easy to grow. Cherry tomatoes are really good producers. The sweet 100s and the grape, the Juliets are also very good, and they're a bit bigger than like your typical small grape tomato. Very good prolific producers. So your growing requirements, the soil pH range should be between 6 and 6.5, and well-drained soil. They don't like to sit in wet, heavy soil. They will develop some root issues. You want to water at the base of your tomato plants. Don't water late in the day. You want to water first thing in the morning. Try not to get the foliage wet. Tomato plants are susceptible to different types of bacterial leaf spot. And if you have a plant that you haven't quite noticed the spots on yet, if you're overhead watering, you're going to splash that fungus from plant to plant. And you can spread that throughout your garden pretty quickly, and it can be a little detrimental depending on how quickly it spreads. And they need at least 1 inch of water per week. So take into consideration if we've had a lot of heavy rainfall, but you probably don't need to water that week. Keep them evenly watered, especially during hot spells. And tomatoes need full sun, and that means 8 hours a day with no shade, not even dappled shade. The more sun, the happier they are, the better they'll produce. Now, one thing to notice with tomatoes, when the temperatures remain up above 90 consistently, they will stop production. They will slow down their production. It's just too hot for the plant to continue to produce. Also, when it's very hot, a tomato plant will start to look kind of wilty. And before you go out and think, oh, it needs more water, wait till the temperatures cool down that night, or go back out in the morning and see if the plant has perked up overnight in the cooler temperatures. And if it has, then it's probably just due to heat and not due to lack of water. And tomatoes are, they're pretty easy. Not a whole lot of pests other than the tomato hornworm, which you'll notice the tops of your tomato plant look like somebody just kind of came along and pruned it off, and it'll just be little straight stalks, and they blend in. However, if you can see their frass, which is their droppings, which are little brown balls, if you look directly up from where you see those, that's usually where you will find the hornworm hanging out, and you'll just want to pick that off and dispose of it. If you have chickens, chickens love them as treats. Other than that, if you go with the hybridized varieties, the F1 hybrids, which were most of that first list, there's not a lot of disease that you have to worry about. Now, eggplant, there's several varieties and shapes and sizes of eggplant. And again, you want to choose disease-resistant varieties and varieties that are best suited to your growing conditions. Are you throwing them in your garden? Are you growing in containers? Make sure you read your labels and or talk to the nursery where you're buying any plant starts. Sorry, this is a little bit small, but there's just several different eggplant varieties and where they come from. We have, Black Beauty is a very typical one grown in New Jersey that's grown for fresh market. And also grown for supermarkets. And then you have some more fancy ones like the Diamond, which is a dark purple. It's a thin teardrop shape. There are long purples. There's the Zebra, which is an elongated oval and it's striped. And there are tons and tons of varieties. And I just kind of picked out some that you may find locally at your local farm markets. Now, because they're in the same family, they tend to have the same requirements as tomatoes, except for they can tolerate a pH up to 6.8. Again, they want well-drained soil. You want to water at the base. Full sun, 8 hours a day. The more sun, the better. The one big pest of eggplant is the Colorado potato beetle, and that will defoliate a plant, but they're pretty obvious when you see them. When they're in their larval stage, they're these little dark orange reddish globular insects that you can just kind of pick off or squish. Other than that, not a whole lot of diseases that you have to be worried about. But again, pick disease resistant varieties. The heirlooms, again, will have less disease resistance than the hybridized versions. And you can get more in-depth information. I didn't want to, tax you too much because it is a bit late in the season to start growing. So if you're interested in growing anything next season, we have some great fact sheets that are available for free on the Rutgers Publications website. Let me see. I see there is a chat. Flea beetle on eggplants. I believe they can be an issue. If you're not averse to spraying, you can get a horticultural oil spray or other pesticide spray. Just be sure to read the label and follow the label. A good trick for that is when you're at the store and trying to decide which pesticide is best for your issue, you'll see a little corner that says peel back for more information. Feel free to peel that label back because that is where you're going to find a much more comprehensive list of what kind of plants you can use that pesticide on, what kind of insects it is effective against. If it's listed for vegetables, it'll tell you how long before harvest you can spray. So that's the post-harvest interval. So those are things that you really want to pay attention to. And we always say with pesticides, the label is the law. So just make sure you follow the directions on the label. And then of course, if you have any issues with your plants, we're available. You can send photos to me at my email address there, or you can call into our horticultural helpline, and I can answer your questions that way as well. Any other questions? Feel free to put them in the chat.
Thanks, Jen. That was great.
You're welcome.
Always good to hear from you and what the little critters are all over my garden.
Yes, yeah. And I'm always happy to help people identify, if you can get pictures of the insects, like something clear, and some of the pictures of some of their damage, usually I can kind of reduce it down to one or two things that it may be.
Great. All right. So again, if you have any questions for Jen, you're welcome to put them in the chat, and you're welcome to put them in the chat if you have any questions for me as I move forward. So let's get started. All right. So to the second half of this presentation, there's a few objectives. We're going to discuss the health benefits of tomatoes and eggplants. And we're going to talk about how to prepare them for both. And then we're also going to talk about how to preserve tomatoes and eggplant, because that's a great way to extend the life of your garden, is to undertake some preserving of the products that you're growing. So we'll give that a whirl here at the end. Since tomatoes are a vegetable, they're in their own right going to be a nutritious food option for us. So like many of the other vegetables that I've talked about in either the Eat What You Grow programs or some of the other programs that I do, they're vegetables. So they have lots of vitamins and minerals and nutrients for us, and they're low calorie. So they're a good option automatically. I just want to tackle the question of whether tomatoes are a vegetable or fruit. And because it comes up as a nutrition educator, it comes up all the time, especially in the schools. The kids are like, that's a fruit. And so just to clarify, the reason that we as nutrition educators who work for the United States Department of Agriculture call them vegetables, even though they have seeds, is because they are eaten like a vegetable. So the USDA nutrition education, we classify them technically as a vegetable. So I just figured I would throw that out there because I could see that being definitely one of the questions in the chat, because it comes up no matter when I'm talking about tomatoes and in the conversation. So figured I'd toss that out for you. So as you can see here on the chart, there's several benefits, many benefits, I guess, to tomatoes. Tomatoes, the first thing we have here is that they're high in fiber. And I've discussed this in some of my other presentations, but fiber is one of the things that the dietary guidelines focuses on because we as Americans do not get enough fiber. Fiber is a really important part of our diet for several reasons. It keeps us regular. It helps us to retain a healthy body weight. And it also reduces the incidence of heart disease and diabetes, as well as diverticulitis disease, colon cancer, and constipation. I know a lot of times people that do have diverticulitis, say that 5 times fast, diverticulitis disease, they do have a problem with tomatoes sometimes because of the skin. But if you're eating a healthy diet throughout your life, hopefully, with things like tomatoes and eggplants in them, hopefully it'll help to prevent that diverticulitis disease. Also, fiber is really good for you to prevent colon cancer and constipation as well. It's recommended that adults eat 25 to 30 grams of fiber every day, but the average American's only getting about 15 grams. So we're significantly lower than we should be. An average size tomato has about 1.8 grams of fiber. And, that's not a great amount, but again, we're in the chat, somebody's talking about in the chat and Jen was telling them, add tomatoes to your burger. Adding it in that way, it's a great way to not only get vegetables, but also get that fiber. So, adding tomatoes to salads, to sandwiches, to wraps, to omelets, every little bit helps to boost that fiber intake. So that's really, really important. The fiber in tomatoes is insoluble fiber, which means that it's water insoluble. So it moves through your digestive tract pretty much the same way it went in, unchanged. But that's really good because it helps to remove the waste through the body and promote normal movement of the intestinal tract. So, there's different types of fiber, and the water insoluble is good for us in that respect. Because of the lycopene in tomatoes, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about them in a minute, but lycopene is really good for helping us to prevent heart disease. And other vitamins and minerals that are in tomatoes include folate or B9, and that's really important for cell development. And that's especially important for women who are in childbearing years, are pregnant or plan to become pregnant, because it helps with the development of cells and obviously with fetal development. Tomatoes also have vitamin K1 for blood clotting, and potassium, which is an essential nutrient. And it's helpful for controlling blood pressure and preventing heart disease as well. One medium tomato has about 28% of the recommended daily allowance of calcium, vitamin C, which is good for immunity. And tomatoes are also low in calories. So they fill you up, and they contain that fiber that helps to fill you up too, and is a low calorie option. And as we were getting on the call, Jen was doing a great job. She had a little bowl of the grape and cherry tomatoes, and she was eating them as her snack. And that's a great snack this time of year. I was telling her I took them to the beach last week. So, wash them up, grab them out of the garden, take them down, have a snack, have them snack for lunch or after dinner snack. They're a really good option. Again, low calorie, high fiber. A little bit more about the lycopene. Lycopene's been studied more recently because of its popularity in the news media. So, the news media gets a hold of something and then it gets very popular. Lycopene gives tomatoes and other red or pink fruits and vegetables their beautiful color. And it's also really good for helping with heart disease prevention and prevention of sunburn. In the fall, I'm going to give a presentation on how to eat seasonally and how that can be advantageous. But one of the reasons to eat seasonal food is because they really protect you during that season for the things you need. So for instance, tomatoes are in season in the summertime, and they help to protect you from the sun because of their lycopene. But that's not to say that you can take a tomato to the beach with you and skip the sunscreen. You want to still use sunscreen. You just might be less likely to burn by having the lycopene from tomatoes in your system. Lycopene also has antioxidants in it that help prevent free radicals and heart disease. So lycopene's ability to reduce free radicals has been shown to help cholesterol levels, and that prevents heart disease. The lycopene lowers the bad cholesterol, or the LDL, and it helps the good cholesterol, the HDL. In studies published in PubMed by Huang Ming, researchers found that the likelihood of premature death decreased by 39% among participants who had higher lycopene blood levels. So those people that regularly eat fruits and vegetables that contain lycopene, like tomatoes. There's been several large studies done on the benefits of lycopene in preventing prostate cancer and lung cancer as well. Originally, these studies showed a very high percentage in the reduction of number of cases in males with prostate cancer. However, more recent studies, because again, it got popular in the news, so people started doing more studies about it to kind of clarify that first study. The numbers have been a little bit lower. However, there's still a reduction being shown. It's not as significant as it was in the early studies, but they're still seeing a reduction from those that eat lycopene with the number of cases of prostate cancer. It's always worth mentioning that when a study is released, there's all this hype around it, and especially something that catches the news media, as I said, and they'll tout like a vegetable or a product as being the next way to reduce a cure chronic disease. But the truth is, you really need to have a balanced diet. So don't go out and start eating a ton of tomatoes just because I said there's lycopene in them and they're good. Make it part of your overall healthy diet to maintain better health. Some other benefits of lycopene are your eyesight, because it delays cataracts. It can improve your bone health. It improves brain health by delaying age-related diseases. And there's a reduction of neuropathic pain from nerve and tissue damage when you have a good amount of lycopene in your diet. So the bottom line is lycopene found in tomatoes, as well as the fiber and other nutrients, make them a really healthy addition to your diet. So I know there's some people that are very anti-tomato. I was really happy last week when my son tried a tomato, but they're a good option. And especially, you can't beat the Jersey tomatoes. I mean, we're so fortunate here that we have them. All right, so eggplant, on to the next one. So eggplants are a wonderful addition to your diet during the summer. And much like the tomatoes, they're actually a fruit because they have seeds, but they're classified the same way as a vegetable because that's how we consume them. So the eggplant doesn't come up as often as being a fruit with the kids, but it's the same deal. So again, let's look at the chart here and some of the interesting things the eggplant can do. A lot of these, as Jen mentioned, they are in the same family, so they overlap. So I tried to pull different things out from each to kind of focus on. I focused on the lycopene with the tomatoes, and this one I'm going to go a little bit more into the diabetes control. So like most other fruits and vegetables, eggplants are low in calories, so they're going to help us to maintain a healthy weight. The vitamins and minerals in eggplant, they're good supporters of good heart health. Specific vitamin and minerals in the eggplant include manganese, folate, potassium, vitamin K, and vitamin C. Additionally, sorry, there goes that evening call for the. Additionally, eggplants contain anthocyanins, which can lower blood pressure and improve eyesight. They also prevent cancer and diabetes, and they contain anti-inflammatories that protect us from cell damage. The anthocyanins found in eggplant create the ability to prevent the cell damage, and they can reduce the risk of some cancers. According to the CDC, diabetes impacts over 34 million people in the United States. I thought that was a really big number, even being in the profession I'm in of doing nutrition education. That's a large number of people. Of those 34 million people affected by, diabetes in the United States, 90 to 95% of them have type 2 diabetes. Eggplants are really high in fiber, which, in addition to keeping our digestive system and tract functioning properly, as we mentioned with the tomatoes, it also helps to lower blood sugar by slowing the digestion process down and therefore slowing the absorption of sugar in the blood. Excuse me a second. I gotta tickle my throat. So again, just to review, it helps to lower the blood sugar by slowing the digestion process down. So that eating the eggplant slows our digestion down because it has the fiber attached to it. And then it slows that absorption of sugar in the body. And when our bodies slow down the absorption of sugar, it helps to keep our sugar levels steady. So it helps to avoid those spikes and crashes that we get sometimes when, you have type 1 or especially type 2 diabetes, and helps you to manage that. So good reason to eat eggplant, right? Let's see. Okay. So enjoying tomatoes. For me, always loved them. What's not to enjoy? I was talking the other day on the beach with a friend. We're talking about tomato sandwiches in the summertime, one of my all-time favorites, right? So tomato, little bread, little roll, something like that, and a little basil. You don't need much else because they're in their own right in New Jersey in the summertime. They're awesome. But I spoke a lot about lycopene when I talked about tomatoes. And the one thing to consider is that when you cook tomatoes, it breaks down those thick cell walls of the tomato, and therefore it increases the absorption of lycopene for us. So raw tomatoes only, they only allow us to absorb about 4% of the lycopene. That's not to say that eating tomatoes cooked is the be all end all. We want to also try to eat them raw once in a while. And especially think about when you eat them in a sauce or like a spaghetti sauce or a tomato sauce, that's usually pureed. So you're not going to have that fiber so much attached to it. So there's pluses and minuses to both of them. So that's why I say eat a variety of raw and cooked. Also, when you have like ketchup, for instance, that's another form of puree, but it has a really high content of sugar. So even though those products are cooked and you'll have a greater amount of lycopene being absorbed by the body, there's other sides to it that are downsides. So, again, mix them up, do both if you can, if you like them that way. And it makes a great way to eat them either way. Adding tomatoes to salads, as we mentioned, sandwiches, omelets, burritos, they allow you to add vitamins and minerals and great taste, right? And then they're also boosting that that intake of your vegetables. And another great way to have tomatoes, I know a lot of restaurants serve it this way, but like if you're out to breakfast, maybe if you don't want to have the potatoes that time, have tomatoes, because a lot of places have fresh tomato slices for you to as an option. So it's another great way to enjoy tomatoes. We're going to talk a little bit about canning tomatoes from your garden in a minute. And you can use tomatoes to make sauces and soups as well. I'm going to share with you a salsa recipe. That's one of my favorite things to make from the garden, is salsa in the summertime. It's great, at the end of the day for a snack or on the weekends to have to share with friends. So I'll share that with you. And I'm also going to share a recipe that I love. It's a tomato Parmesan soup that can be eaten warm or cold. And you can use it in the summertime or the wintertime, but it's very flavorful and very good. So I'll share those recipes post-program and hopefully get you cooking with and eating more tomatoes in the process. All right, so this recipe here, the background of this slide is making me kind of hungry. I haven't had dinner yet. This is actually a dish that I've made before, and it's it's kind of like a tomato bake. It's a version, I guess, of non-traditional eggplant parm. It has tomatoes in it, but it's all fresh vegetables. So there's no real sauce, a little bit of cheese there. You can see on the top, a little breadcrumbs. But it's made, with a little less of the breading to cut back on that. So if that's something you're interested in. Eggplant's really versatile, so we can roast it, we can saute it, we can bake it. Just add a little spice to the eggplant along with olive oil, and it makes a great side dish or even a main dish. And I know a lot of people, I hear people say all the time, well, the only thing I know how to make with eggplant is eggplant parm. Well, that's great. I love eggplant parm. It's one of my faves, but you can also use eggplant as a substitute for other favorite meals. So for example, if you slice it very thin, and there's actually some vegetable tools you can get if you like, to make it really thin, you can make use it for lasagna noodles. So one of my favorite dishes is, instead of having the actual noodles, is to have the eggplant, and it gives a nice little flavor to it. And it's really, really good. So I'm going to send you, one of the recipes I'm going to send you again is from the Purdue Extension, and they have a recipe on there for eggplant lasagna roll-ups. So you can give them a whirl. Because eggplant's really a great garden vegetable, it makes a nice light dinner in the summer. And it's very tasty, especially when you accompany it with fresh herbs from the garden like basil and rosemary and thyme or oregano. In the fall, the fall and the summer, eggplant's really a great addition to roasted vegetables. And what happens when you add eggplant to a dish, it really kind of takes on the taste of what you're cooking with it. So if it's like, canned tomatoes or, fresh tomatoes or something like that, it takes on more of that dish. So, you can add more vegetables to your diet without changing the flavor of what you're cooking. So when you're making something like, say you're doing some kind of, chicken in a pan or something like that with vegetables, throw some eggplant in there. And that's a great way to, again, bump up that veggie count. Some people find the taste of eggplant to be a little bitter. So if that's the case, you can slice it down and sprinkle a little salt on top of it and kind of pat it dry. And then after an hour, rinse it off to rinse the salt off. And that's going to make it less bitter. But the downside to that is now you've added sodium to a really healthy product. So if especially if you're watching your sodium, I wouldn't recommend that. But you just have to be aware that it's going to make, if you do use salt to kind of pat it down, it's going to make it to take the bitterness out. It's going to be adding something else. But I did, in my research that I did for this, I did notice that Purdue Cooperative Extension said that usually it's more bitter when you buy eggplant from the grocery store. But if you get it from the farm market or from your garden, it's going to be a lot fresher, and it's also going to be a lot less bitter. So another reason to grow eggplant in the garden, is to have it so it's a little less bitter, or you can, grab it from one of our local farm markets in the area. So let's talk about the do's and don'ts of preserving. I'm going to go into a little more detail within each of the vegetables within eggplant and tomato, but just as an overview, here's the do's and don'ts. So make sure that you're using USDA, so United States Department of Agriculture, National Center for Home Preservation, or university or extension websites. These sites stay up to date all the time on the latest science around preserving and use practices that are safe for food handling. Using another source could easily put you and your family and friends at risk by not having the proper amounts of things like acidity, whereby allowing bacteria to grow in your canned products. So for the do's list, that's for the do's. You want to make sure that you're looking for a resource, and you can see down the bottom there that's credible. You can see down the bottom there, usually those resources will end in .gov or .edu. And for the don'ts, please make sure to use, don't use blogs or sites that alter or change tested recipes, because again, they might not be doing things to prevent the spread of bacteria and things like that, causing people to get sick with foodborne illnesses. Further, you should avoid recipes that have been handed down for generations. Now, I know that they're favorites and I know how special they are, but the things that they used to do aren't necessarily the things we want to do now. And there's actually reasons for that. So our food supplies really changed a lot since grandmom and great grandmom canned foods. And using the most up-to-date tested recipes is really the safe way to preserve the foods. There's different varieties out there now of vegetables. Tomatoes is an example. So something that your grandmother canned way back when might be different than what you're gonna preserve now. Additionally, canning and preserving any fruit or vegetable means using ripe, undamaged produce. So don't find all the stuff that fell at the bottom of the garden and grab that up and say, I'm going to go can this stuff now. That's not the stuff you want to use. You want to use the really fresh, firm, good ripened things, not the icky looking stuff. You want to use the good stuff. Okay. All right. So a little bit about preserving tomatoes. As we talk about preserving tomatoes, again, I just really, especially with tomatoes, you really need to follow the recipe exactly. It's critical when canning any tomatoes or tomato products. As I mentioned, the acidity level is critical to keeping the tomato base preserved safe. And some might say that their grandmother did it one way. Again, don't use grandmom's recipe. today's recommendations are based in the science, and that allows us for the pH levels in the tomatoes. They're very different pH levels in than they were in past years because of those varieties. So you want to watch those alkaline and pH levels. You want to make sure they're accurate. If it says to use lemon juice from a container, use that. Do not use lemon juice from a lemon because of the acidity levels. They've been tested. To keep the levels where they should be, follow the recommendations of trusted sources like the ones that I gave. And salsa, that's a tough one, right? So salsa is one that you really want to take note of to not change the recipe prior to canning it by adding extra spices. In addition, you want the recipe, do what the recipe calls for. And similarly, you should not add cornstarch or thickeners prior to canning salsa because that could alter the way it is preserved and kept and cause the growth of some things we don't want in there, like bacteria. After you open the jar, like, so if you can it correctly and everything's good, once you open the jar, if you want to add more spices or you want to add something to thicken it, that's different because you're going to eat it right away. So just before you can it, you want to keep to that recipe and prevent the bacteria growth. There's also differences when you're canning whole tomatoes versus pureed. So you want to pay attention to those differences and follow instructions carefully because of how they cook through and whatnot. So, and how much they heat up. So be cautious of the amount of times and that information. The upside to preserving your home garden harvest is really enjoying the wonderful taste of Jersey tomatoes all year long. So it's a great thing to do. You have some I'm going to have some additional materials that'll cover canning and preserving of tomato products sent to you in my follow-up email, and follow along with those and see. And there's some recipes included there too. So I can't remember if it was Purdue. I forget which one it was. They had some recipes for the canning of different things, so you can check them out and give them a chance. But look at the season too, because I know I've tried the can a few times. I don't really have a garden big enough to do a lot of canning with, but when you're looking to get those tomatoes, don't wait until late August or September because you might not have enough to be able to do it if you're buying it from a farm market or something. And you do want those nice, firm, good tomatoes to use. All right, so canning eggplant. Don't do it. It's not really recommended by the National Center for Food Preservation. They don't want you to can eggplant. You can dehydrate eggplant, and then you can also blanch them and freeze them. They're both acceptable ways to preserve the eggplant. I'm going to send you details and instructions from South Dakota Extension on this. And one thing to note, a couple things to note as you're preserving your eggplants by blanching and freezing them or by dehydrating them, is that you want to leave when freezing them a 1/2 inch when packing your eggplant of headroom. And then for the dehydrating process, you should first boil the eggplant as indicated in the instructions. So you have to boil it first. Again, like with tomatoes, preserving your eggplant is a great way to extend the life of your garden. One thing I also want to mention, I think I have included in there the ability to have directions for sun drying the tomatoes. Not really sun dried, but like dehydrating tomatoes. So I included that in. So if you're somebody that's into dehydrating your food and having them for later, I'm including instructions on that too in the information that I'll be sending later. So this is overlapping itself. I can't change it now. If you hold your phone, open your phone up and then open your camera, hold it up to the screen. If it's a smartphone, you should be able to scan this bar. It'll take you on your phone to an evaluation for my portion of the evening's talk. And I'd be really, really appreciative if you do it. I'm only getting about 5 responses back. I looked at last semesters. And so really helpful to me if you would go and take that survey and evaluation and let me know how I'm doing. I appreciate that. I'm also going to send that out with the email. So if you're on the call via your telephone and you're just listening, then please don't hesitate when I send that out in the email to respond to that. Also with the email, I do want to make sure that I tell everybody I right now have my very trusty assistant, Marion, who has been with me the short time that I've been here, has retired, sadly. So I don't have anyone right now helping out. So I'll get that email out to you. It just might take a little bit longer than usual because she's not with me right now. She's on vacation. I am launching the second poll as well right now. If you would take a minute to take that poll, it would be very helpful. Again, tells us how we're doing. This is a presentation that's very near to my and dear to my heart because Jen and I started this when I first started here. And I think that it's a great way to reach out to folks. And I just want to see, you know, what other things what you're learning, what you're doing, and how we might assist you in the future. And then we're not moving on. There we go. Here is all of our social media handles and how to contact us if you're interested in getting a hold of us. And I also, I'm going to click back to this. This is my very lengthy reference list. A lot of information for you. So, oops, went to the end. Okay. And then there's some fact sheets. And like I said, I will be sharing those fact sheets with you. So I don't know why I went right to one of the fact sheets. All right, I'll go back up to the contact information. So does anybody have any questions for us before we finish up? Got some in the chat here. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Yes. So Jen's saying the younger vegetables are going to be a bit sweeter and you can let them get a little larger if you wish. You know, those, I'm telling you, those grape tomatoes this year, they were sweet. They're yummy. They're like candy to me.
And yeah, so tomatoes, when they're ready, they will basically just like pop right off of the stem, especially the cherry tomatoes. I have my handy dandy bowl here. It's hard to see. So the stem kind of stays on, but will break off from the plant, from the clusters. And it just makes it easier, especially like the sweet 100s that I mentioned. They'll get like a cluster from 8 to 12 fruits, and they start ripening at the end, and you can kind of like harvest the one end and 2 days later harvest the next little bit. And they should just pop right off, and they're nice and shiny, and they're firm, and they're sweet. I mean, they have a little bit of give when you squeeze them, but you don't want them, if they're super soft, you know, put them in your compost.
Yeah, I've been noticing, I don't know if anybody else has in their garden, all the, we've had so much wind this year. And we had up in the northern end of the county, we had another tornado one night. So a lot of my tomatoes have been on the ground when I go out in the morning. So I scoop them up real quick before they get icky. But some of them have been, I guess I should have picked them earlier before the wind came.
Yeah, I mean, green ones will come off in the wind as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
We've been having, but you know, if they were only on the ground overnight and they're not damaged, I will pick them up in my own garden. Obviously, if I was picking at the farm for, you know, sale to the public, those would go home with me or remain in the field. But if they don't split when they hit the ground, and probably another little tip is, if it looks like if you have a lot of tomatoes that are just about ready and you think maybe another day or two and we're going to have a really big rain event, you might want to pick them that day or two early before the rain, because excessive rain or excessive watering may cause them to split, especially in the cherry tomatoes, because that plant is going to go, ooh, water, and suck up as much of that resource as possible and put it into the fruit, and you'll see a lot of splitting.
Yeah.
Especially after heavy rain events in ripened fruit.
Yeah, I've had that happen too. So Jen, it looks like you might have answered some of the questions. How do you know when to pick the eggplant? And you said most eggplants should be firm and the skin should be shiny.
Yeah, you know, like you can kind of squeeze them and like leave a little indent. They shouldn't be hard as a rock. See, handout materials. I believe Natalie Chris will be sending out an email with the links for all the
Yes,
handout
I will,
material.
definitely, yeah. I have it all ready to go. Like I said, it just might be a little slower coming than usual without my buddy,
Yeah,
Marianne.
I can volunteer my secretary to help you.
Yeah,
I'll
I'm
tell
sure
her-
she will.
I'll
I'm
tell
sure
her
she will.
tomorrow.
Yeah, I have it all ready to go. Like I said, I just need to pull the list together, and it's really not a lot. You just have to get the time to do it.
Yeah.
With everything. So, but I'll get that out to you guys next week for sure. And like I said, there's going to be a lot of the canning information in there, some recipes and things like that. And then I know Jen always likes to include some of the fact sheet information too. So we hope you'll take a peek at that. Anything else anybody has questions on? I'm going to end the poll. Looks like we got about 87% of people. Thank you for that. And again, if you get the email and you would do the little one I send out, that's very helpful. All right, nothing else?
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. I would looks like
Hopefully
a lot of people would like to do this virtually from now on. So, and that's, that's a hard question for us. I got to meet somebody the other day and said, hey, you're the lady that does the programs. I'm like, yeah, it was so nice to see another human being. And oh yeah, I hope you like them. So I hope everybody's enjoying them. But again, like this is one of the ones that I feel like maybe it would be cool to be in person. Maybe early on we'll do one in person where we could plant some things that you can take, like maybe do a spring make and take, and then we could do the virtual ones after that. So
yeah, and hopefully everybody can join us for our pumpkins in September.
Absolutely, yeah. So we're gonna do pumpkins in September, and that should be a fun one too. Next week coming up, I'm doing a talk for the Lunch and Learn on eating for brain health, which again, we'll mention lycopene, but not very much because we did it in this one. So some cool stuff coming up from Extension. So check out our website and have a good, safe rest of the evening and the summer. And we'll hopefully see you again in a program soon.
Thanks,
everybody.